Hilchos Shabbos Perik Shmini Aser. Hametzi Dover Mishus Hayochel Mishus Harabim, Mishus Harabim Mishus Hayochel, Eini Chayev, Ad Sheyotzi Mimenu Shir Shemoil Klum. It has to be something which is effective, which is moil. Ve'elu hein shiuri haitzto. Hamoitzi oichli adam is kigregus. We're talking about food that people eat, so it's kigregus. Umitztarfen zem zeh. And it doesn't have to be the same food. You can have different foods, but as long as you have a kigregus of food, that's a share of itzah. For who? Sheyeh kigregus meneichalatzmi. Has to be a gregus of food, which is chutz min haklippim, besides the peels, v'agarinim, and the pits. V'oktzin is the stem which it's attached to, and v'asupin v'amursin, it's types of bran. In other words, it has to be the food, not the peels or parts of the food which are not edible. Yayin, if we're talking about wine, so it's kedei reiver avius. Now wine, bisman hashas, bisman Rambam also. So it was strong wine, and therefore they would take the wine and they would add three parts water to 1 part wine. So the M is the share of a yain is a revius, because that's the share of a keshel bracha. So, but you don't need a revius of yain in order to have a keshel bracha, because you have only a reiver revius and you mix it with water. There's manazeh that we don't mix it in that level. So with pashtus, you need a revius. You need a revius of wine. Halacha beis yayin kedei reiver revius. And the share of reiver revius is because they used to have strong wine, and therefore they would mix the wine, 1 wine to 3 of water. So a reiver revius is enough wine to make up a revius. So that's a share of reiver revius. In Hoya, I don't know, Bisman Rambam was also by maybe such strong wine. If you know how it is Bisman Hazed, that we don't really mix the wine with 3 times water. I'll call upon him. Yayin kedei reiver revius. V'im hoya korish, it was congealed, so it's because ice. Chalev behemoth tehera is kedei gmia, a gulp. The chalev tmeya, which you don't drink, is kedei lichil ayin achas, to put into 1 eye. Chalev isha v'leven beitza, that's kedei litin b'meshifa, enough to put into a salve, which was an ointment, and they would mix with chalev isha and leven beitza. So the amount that would be normally made to make a meshifa, that's how much milk or leven beitza you need. Shemen kedei losuch etz baktana shel regel cotton ben yenli, enough oil to be able to anoint the small finger of a child that was just born, small finger of his foot, which is the smaller vices than the fingers on the hand. Tal do kedei loshuf es akiluris. Kiluris is an ointment that you put on the eye, and again, you mix it with a certain ointment, so the amount of tal that you need to mix with an ointment that'll be able to put into both eyes, that's the amount of tal that you need. And the killer is kedei loshev b'mayim, amount of killer you need in order to be able to mix it with water. Kedei loshev b'mayim. That's if you have the ointment and you're going to mix it with water. Now, which water? So it's brought down that they would have a special water. It wasn't regular water, because regular water they didn't use for kilurim, and that's what we said before. Tal kedei loshev is like kilurim, but there was a special water that came from Golul, and that was mixed with the killer. So if you have the amount of killer which you normally mix with water, that's the killer. That's the shear. Umayim kedei lirchetz pnei meducha, to be able to wash off the top of a meducha. Meducha is something you use to crush things. Dvash kedei litein al roish hakosis. A kosis is a wound. It says that it's talking about a wound on an animal that carries things, and therefore gets little wounds. So the amount of dvash that you need to put on top of such a wound. Dam ushar kol hamashkin and v'chol hashefchen, wastewater, is all kedei revius. So there's simple water. Mashkin generally is a revius, and that includes dam and also shefchem, which shefchem are used to mix with cement, so the shear is a revius. However, there were a number of liquids which are smaller than revius, because they're used less than a revius, like milk and all kinds of things which you use that liquid for specific items which take up less than the revius. Teven tvua, kimoli pi para. Now, again, the rule is that an item which is normally used for something that needs a larger share, the share is a larger share. Even though it could be used for something that needs a smaller share, but since it's generally used for something that needs a larger share, so you need a larger share. So maybe if you have, let's say, liquid, which you could use it maybe for something that needs a smaller share, but that's not really what it's aimed for. So therefore it needs a larger share. Mashenkin, those things that he mentioned, which are used also for things that need smaller shiurim, and that's a regular thing for it, so then it's used. Then the smaller share applies. That's the rule. Teven tvua, the straw of tvua is kimloi pi para, because that's who you feed it to. But teven kitnius, the straw that comes from beans, so that's already a rougher straw. So that's kimlei pi gomel, because a para is not capable of handling teven kitnius, and therefore you're going to give it to a gomel, and a gomel is stronger, and a gomel is larger. So you need a bigger share in order to be chayiv. So the teven tvua you'll be chayiv on less teven kitnius. You need more kimlei pi gomel. Then hoitzi teven kitnius lahachile lepara. But if you specifically had in it's not normally for para. But if you decided you want to give it to a para, and a para could eat it, is kimlei pi para sha'achila yedei adchak shma achila, and therefore you're chayiv for a smaller share. If you take it out specifically for a para, you're chayiv for a smaller share. Amir, which is also a type of part of the shaft over there, that's the ears of the grain, is kimlei pi tle. So that's even smaller. It's smaller than a pipara. It's kimlei pi tle, because a tle could eat the amr. You don't need a para to eat the amr. Amr could be eaten by a tle. Obviously, a para could also eat amr, but you'll give it to a tle, so it's a smaller share. Asabim, if it's grasses, which is even softer than amr, so it's kimlei pigdi. So we're talking about 4 animals over here. We're talking about a para, a gomel, a gdi, and a tle. So the largest is a gomel, and after that is a para, and after that is a tle, and after that is a gdi. So things that are only royal gomel, so you have to have kimlei pi gomel, a larger share. Things are royal also to a para, it could be kimlei pi para. It's be milei pi para. If things are royal even to a like amir, so it's kimlei pi tle, because a tle could eat it. Mashenkin asabim, even a gdi could eat it. So maybe it's the smaller share. Ali shum ba'ali ptzolim is imhoya lachem kibregris, imlachem is kibregris. Even though gregris is greater than a pigdi, a gregris is a bigger share than a gdi. So let's give it to a gdi. No, because you're not. If it's royal achila, you're not going to give it to a gdi. It's royal achila, so mele becomes a gregris. Nepnei shein nechel nodam. The evasion, then it's kamel pigdi. The aim it start from zen. Now, if you have, let's say, different types together, so he says the aim it start from Zaim zel lechamer shabam. Avol mitznar from lekal shabam. What does that mean? Ketzad. Those heitzi teven tvua kitnus. You took out teven, and that teven is a mixture of tvua and kit. Is the teven of tvua and the teven of kitnus. Now the teven of tvua is softer, so it's kimlei pi para. The teven of kitnus is harder, so it's kimlei pi gomel. Is in yesh b'shneim kimlei pi para is potter is potter, because since we're dealing with something which is not royal lepara, the teven of kitnis is not royal lepara. It has to have completely gomel, so therefore it doesn't have a shir. If what's royal lepara was nitzaref to what's royal gomel, kimlepi gomel chay v'chein kol kiyetz b'zelin Shabbos. Because even though it's royal lepara, but you could also give it to a gomel, and it's not such an unusual thing to give it to a gomel, and therefore, as long as so it knows you have something which is kimlepi gomel, which is the share of kimlepi gomel mixed with something which is the share of kimlepi para. So if you have kimlepi gomel, it's good, but if you have kimlepi para, it's not good. Halacha dalet. I mean, it's important to say that we're talking about this thing which is kimlepi para is also given to gomel. The Moshe, something that would be a Michael Adam, which is kigregus, and it's mixed together with a Michael Behemoth, so they wouldn't mix. Because something that's a Michael Adam, you're not going to give to a Behemoth, and something that's a Michael Behemoth is not a Michael Adam. So the Rambam doesn't say that. Well, l'chura, it can't mix. L'chura, it can't mix. because it's not right for it. You're not going to give it to a behemoth. Hamoitzi eitzim. So what's the shear of eitzim? The shear of eitzim is kedei levashel kigroigris mibeitzes hatarnagolim. The shear of a groigris, a fig of a beitzes hatarnagolim, which is true, and this beitzes hatarnagolim is trufa b'shemen. It's already mixed with oil. When it's sooner be'elfus and it's on a pot, and the pot is a pan, and that pan is already hot. So you have a hot pan. You put an egg that's already scrambled together with oil, and now you need some wood to continue the fire in order for it to finish off the egg. So you don't need that much wood. That's the amount of wood that you need to be moitzi. A moitzi kana, if you take out a little kana, a little reed, is kedelas kulmus hamagil, Rosh Hashanah, big enough to be able to make a little pen out of it, a quilt. The imhoya ova, if it was thick and it's not right to use as a pen, or marusa, so it's broken, so then it's shiuri ketzim. So it ketzim as a din like ketzim. And the question, you have to be able to use it for firewood. They levashel gregris from a beitzas tanagivs. Hamoitzi tavlin, spice, kedei tabel beitza. So you don't have to have one type of spice. You can have a few different types of spices. But if enough spice to the tabel beitza, that's fine. Pilpul over here. Pilpul is normally pepper. Over here means pilpul. That's something you put in your mouth. Just as in order to freshen up your breath. So it's kosher. And itron, which is also has an unpleasant reach, is kosher. Which also, there were certain functions that itron had that we're able to use kosher, and also having an unpleasant reach seems to be also a function that would somehow or another chase away mazikim from a chayla with this type of thing. But itron had a function in itself as kosher. Itron is flammable. We learned this. Negeh hilchas Shabbos. Negeh hilchas madlikim. Reach teiv was also kosher. Reach ra is kosher. Meaning, there's something that has a bad smell, and so it's kosher because the bad smell has a purpose. The purpose is, as we said, that it could chase away a ruchas rois, mazikim. Meaning, psamen kol shein. Argomon teiv, which is the dye which causes argomon, a purple dye. It also has a good fragrance. Is kosher. Psulas haveret. If you have a closed rose, achas. Mini matchis hakoshim, kigoyin nechoishes ubarzel is also kosher. If you have something miyafar hamizbeach or miyavni hamizbeach or mimekak svarim or mimekak mitpachiseyim, whereas you have something which is like broken off from these things, or from the svarim are falling apart and it like was crumbling, and you have the crumbling of svarim or the crumbling of the covers of the svarim. So these things have to be put away. They can't just be thrown away. So because they have to be put away, it's a chshivus, and therefore this all kosher, even though you're just putting it away. But since matzni nesin l'kniza, so it has a din of kosher. Gachelis, a coal, is also kosher. Aber v'hametzi shalheves is potter, because the shalheves is ein b'mamish. So you're not really carrying anything. Mashaik and all these things is kosher. Hametzi zireni gina she'ein nechol. No, they're not edible seeds. Is shiurim pachas migregas. Their shear is pachas migregas. It doesn't say how much. Some people want to say that Kaddish says that the shear is a kazayas, but the Rambam is not specific how much is the shear. If a person takes mizera kishuyim, cucumber seeds, ishnayim, mizera diluyim from gourds, ishnayim, mizera pula mitzri, a certain bean from Mitzrayim, ishnayim, hametzi subin. You take out subin, which is a coarse bran, so then it's enough to put on top of the core of tzarfi zov. And those, a goldsmith has his oven, and on top of that there's a hole, and you put bran on it for different reasons, either to contain the heat, or that causes makes things better. I'll call upon him. Either way, that was the seder that they would put mursan on the top of a kurs shel tzarif zov. Hametzi mursan. Mursan is a finer bran, so it depends. Im lachila is shiurik egregis. Libehema is shiurik imle pigdi, which is even smaller. Litzvia kidei litzbeya beged cotton. the amount that's a beged cotton, which we're going to learn later, or we learned already earlier, that we're talking about a head covering, something like a net that women put over their heads. Lulav is radim v'charuvim. The lulavim of zradim and carrots is actually amtiku when they're before they became sweet is kigregris. Just at that point in time, it's edible. Once it's yamtiku, becomes sweet. It's kimlei pigdi. Then they become not edible. Aval haluf v'chardel v'turmusin ushar kol hanechboshim. These types of things, mustards and all other types of vegetables, is ben shiyamtiku, ben achlei yamtiku, is either way it's kegrevis. So these things are edible even after yamtiku. Mashenkin, those other things, once you yamtiku, they're used more for animals. Okay. Halacha zayin. Hamoitzi garinim. Takes out garinim as seeds, are the seeds of fruit. Zim lachila is chamash. 5 seeds are considered a shear. V'im lahasokah is a rain keitzim. So the shear is kedei levashel beitza, the gregus of a beitza. V'im lecheshben. If the point of these seeds are you want to use them as a cheshbon, in other words, you're like when you're calculating things, you put away the seeds in order to show how much was there. So then shtayim, if you have 2 such seeds, that's already lecheshbon. V'im lezriya, if the seed now, Pashas v'im lezriya sounds like you're taking it out lezriya. But later on, we're going to learn that if you take out lezriya, so even if you take out 1, it's chayiv. So you're going to have to learn. This Mishnah says it. Someone says that v'im lezriya over here means if it's oimed lezriya, it doesn't mean that you're taking it out lezriya. If it's im lezriya, if this is seeds that are oimed lezriya, pit. I've been saying seeds. It's really pits. Garinim are pits, not seeds. The im lezriya shtayim. If they're oimed lezriya, the intent, the pastures intent. What you're going to do with these pits is to plant them so it's to hametzi ezev. If you take out an ezev, which is an ezev, it's a grass which is an edible grass, is la'oichlim is kigregis. If you're taking it out, if it's something that you want to eat, so it's kigregis. Lebehema, if something you want to give to a behema, so it's kimlei pigdi. La'etzim is kashir etzim, and lahazoyed is the hashdin of that your mazah, the mechatos, or for say your mazah with an ezev, so that's kashir azoy, the shear that you need, the size of an ezev for azoy. So depending on what you're intending on doing with this item is shaykhus to be roy for all different types of things. Depending on what you're interested in doing with this item, that will determine what kind of shear this item has. Halacha ches hamoitzi klipi agoizim. Shells of nuts, so klipi remaining shells of pomegranates, istis upua usharat atzvoim. So things that create seva, create dye, is kedei litzbeah bem beten beged cotton kisvacha shemanichan abonis harushaim. So if you take out enough material that you can make dye, which will be enough to dye this svacha, this net, which they put on their heads. V'chein hamoitzi mei raglayim ben arboim yem, which is used as the detergent, as a cleanser, a Nessa Alexandria, which is also some type of a detergent, like Boris Kimunya, or Va'ashlag, all these types of cleansers, or Sharkol Amanakim, is Kedei Lechabis Beget Cotton Kisvacha, enough cleansing detergent or whatever to be able to cleanse this small garment, which is like a net. Hoitzi Samonim Shruyim. If you took out Samonim which were soaking, is kedei litzbe'ebem dugma la'erik, to be able to dye with it a sample for a weaver. So it's brought down that a weaver, you give him a sample of it, and he take the sample and maybe put it into something that he was using for the weaving. It's a very small item, a very small item. Why exactly is there a difference between the first samonim that we're dealing with, which are dyes, things that are making dye, and over here, Samonim Shruyim, which is a different shear, Dugma La'erig, I don't catch, I'm not sure. Someone says, but I'm not sure. Halacha Tes, Hamoitzi Diyoy ala Kulmas, is Shiurei Kedei Lichti B'manu Shtei Asias. Enough Diyoy that you could write 2 Asias. Now, L'chura, why aren't you chai for the Kulmas? They bring up Sarabin Chananel in Shabbos, Daf Pei, we said, I'm not interested in the Kulmas, he's interested only in the Diyoy. Al derech, well, later on we're going to learn that he's taking out something, a person, and the mita, he's not interested in the mita, he's only interested in the person. So Memela, he's potter on the mita, and if he's potter on the persons, he's potter afal mita. But L'chura over here, he's going to use the kulmas to write. I mean, Bishleim over there, he's taking out the person in a bed. So the bed is holding the person. So Bishleim, if the kulmas is holding the diyoy, so I understand. The kulmas is holding the diyoy. I'm interested in the diyoy, I'm not interested in the kulmas. But L'chura, how am I going to get the diyoy onto the paper? L'chura, I'm going to use the kulmas. I made it diyoy la kulmas. It's kshiurik, they lichtiv menishteisius. So you're going to need the kulmas. So you need the kulmas. So how could you say you're not chai for the kulmas? You need the kulmas because you need the oisius. But I'll call upon you're not chai for the diyoy unless it has shteisius. And for the kulmas, vice you for sure not chai. Avalim hoitzi adiyoy b'fnei atzmei, not in the kulmas. Oy bekeses, so it was in an inkwell. Is tzarich shiyeh beyeser al zeh. It's not enough to have kedei shteisius because it has to be kedei shiyal yimena ala kulmas. It has to be enough ink that you'll be able to get it onto a kulmas, and from the kulmas you'll be able to write shteisius. There will be left something in the kesses, there'll be some left on the kulmas. Hoye bekesses kedei oisachas, ubekulmas also kedei oisachas. Ebedye levyade keisachas, ubekulmas kedei oisachas. So notice you have ink enough for the two asias, but they're divided. Some are in the kulmas and some are in the kesses. Or not in the kesses, you're just holding the ink somehow, is areza suffix. Does the ink have to be together, ink, which is kedei shtei asius, or you can have ink, separate pieces of things of ink, and that'll von deswegen be the shear of the diya. Hoitzi shtei asius, the kosman kshu mahalach. So even though normally when you're mahalach, it's not considered a hanacha. It's only a hanacha when you stop. But over here, since you wrote it, is ksivas and zui hanachasim, the actually writing of the ink onto the paper, that's the hanacha. Hoitzi isachas v'kosva, and then v'chazar, v'hoitzi oishniya v'kosva, potter. Why? Shekvar chasra ha'isar rishena, because the first ice was already dried up. So in other words, when you take out an item, and then you take out another item, so you could be mashing the shear, but that only if the first item is still there. Mashenkin, if you take out, that's important, if you take out a half a shear, you have to take out a gregors. So we'll soon learn. You can take out a half of gregors and then take out another half of gregors. But when you take out the second half of gregors, the first half of gregors is not there, so you're not chayav. So here also, you're being chayav and taking out diyoy. But since the diyoy dried up, so it's not there anymore. So what happens if a person was saying you could make the hanacha by writing, and you wrote two asias? So we're assuming that you're writing the second ice while the first ice is still wet. Masha'inkin, if you wrote it and you waited for a while, the Rambam is saying that here you went back and you came back. What happens if you didn't go back for the second ice? You were writing and you weren't rushing. You wrote one letter and then you waited and then you wrote another letter and you never went back. But l'chura, by the time you wrote the second letter, the first letter was dry. So l'chura, the din should be that you're potter. I'm not sure, but l'chura, that's what should come out. Halacha Yud. Hamoitzi koichel, it takes out koichel, things that you put into your eye. Bein l'refuah, it's something, a color that you put into your eye, is bein l'refuah, bein l'tachshit, is enough kedei likchil ayin achas. It has to be enough kedei to be put koichel on one eye. B'makim shendarken l'hiskashet ele b'chila shnei einayim, and v'hitziyah l'hiskashet. So then is that sheyetzi kedei likchil shnei einayim. Zephes v'gofres. If you took out sulfur or zephes as tar, is kedei lasis nekev. Lasis nekev means to put it on top of a bottle, which you have over there, mercury, and then you make a little hole in it, and that's how you take it out. And it's a special process of how you deal with raw silver as well. So zephes v'gofres means it's enough to stuff a hole and then be able to make a hole in that zephes which you put on top of the hole. Shaiva, kedelitna pinek of cotton, to be able to close up, to stop off a hole. Devek, glue, kedelitin bereisha shavsheves. They would take a small stick and they would put some glue on it, and then a bird would land on it and it would get stuck to it. In order to be able to put under a little like oil, under a cookie, which is the size of a cellar. So if you have that amount of revav, which is oil or fats, so then that's the shir. Hametzi halacha yudal. Hametzi adama, earth, which is Rambam says like red earth, which they would use to seal envelopes or seal sacks, and then they would put a seal on it. So hametzi adama kedelasis choikim heigeres. They would use it to seal. They would seal up the sack or an envelope, and then they would put a seal on it. That would be the simon. Tit kedelasis pikur. If you have to make the P of a core, to make the top of a core. Zevel oichel dak, kedei lezabul kreisha, to fertilize a leak. Choil gas, that's kedei la'ariv imulei kaf sayodim. If you have like plaster and you'd mix it with rough sand, so if you have a full kaf of sayodim, how much choil gas would you need to mix with this mulei kaf sayodim? That's the shit. Charsis, which is crushed cheres, is kedelasis pi kur shel tzerfizov. Again, they would use this crushed cheres to make the top of this kur shel tzerfizov. A goldsmith would have a special oven that he would use for his gold, and the top of it, the pi of that kur, they would make something with it. Seir kedelegabel tit here, kedelegabel tit. Again, last is pikur shel tzerfizov. So the tit that they would put on the pikur of tzerfizov, they would also use here. Sid, it's lime. Kedei losud etzba ktana shebabonus. So they would put lime and then they would pull it off, and that would be some type of before take off hair, whatever they would do. Certain nose would help her. So putting on a small etzba ktana, the sid, and then pulling it off, that would be something that they would do, and that's the shear of sid. Offer ve'efer, k'dei lechasis dam tzipra ktana. Tzrir even, a small stone, k'dei lizreg bebehema v'targish. You want to get the behema's attention, so you throw a stone at it, so it has to be big enough to get the behema's attention. V'hu mishkal asor zuzim. Cheres, how big does the cheres have to be? K'dei lekabel bei revis. Halacha yud beis. Hametzi chevel, rope, is kedei lasis oizen lekupa, to be able to put a handle for a basket, for a kupa. Gemi, which is a different type of material, which grows, is kedei lasis tloi lenofo lekfara, to make also a hook for a sieve. Hutzin, the baskets, material you make baskets. Kedei lasis oizen lekfifan mitzvahs, again, to make a handle for a kvifa mitzvahs, which is much smaller than the kupa that we spoke about earlier. Sieve, something that comes like what's in a palm tree, like a certain fibers they can use for a stopper. To stop a mashpich of yain, to be able to stop the wine from flowing. Muchin, you have like raw wool. Kedelasis kader ke'egis, enough to be able to put together and make into a ball the size of an egg. Etzem kedelasis tarva, to be able to make a spoon. You have a bone, you make a spoon out of it. Schuchis, a piece of glass. Kedeligrid be reisha karker, in order to be able to sharpen the top of the karker, which is a stick that you use for weaving. There was a piece of glass which is big enough to be able to cut two pieces of thread together. Hamoitzi shtei nimen miznav asus or miznav apore chayev, because they were used. These things were used to make different types of kelim. Hoitzi achas min akosher shebechazir. One of these, one nima from a hard nima from a chazir is also chayev. Nitzrei dekel vein chutei hoetz, chutim that are made out of wood from a dekel, from the bark, is shtayim. Chure dekel was vehein klipe hacharoyes. They're part of that. They're the bark of the charoyes is achas. Charoyes is also a dekel tree. Mitzemer gefen umitzemer klach mitzemer gmalim varnovim v'chayesh b'yam ushar kol anitfin. As you're taking out raw cotton, or mitzemer klach, which is from silk, and with Semer Gmalim, and Varnovim, or rabbits here or whatever. So all these things that you spin into threads is kedei litva is chut erech arba tvach. It has to be enough to be able to make a thread 4 tvachim long. Hamitzim min abeged min asak min ha'oir is kishirin l'tumah kach shirin leitzah. Abeged is shleisha al shleisha, hasak is arba al arba, and ha'oir is chamisha al chamisha. That's the share of tumah, and that's the share of itzah. Halacha yidal hamitzi er shalenis abed klal. You take out a piece of leather that was a piece of skin that was taken off the animal, and there was nothing done to it. It's not processed. Eladayin hurach is sheyurei kedei lotzur mishkelis ktanish mishkala shekel. To put a weight and to cover it, like to cover it over with a weight, which is mishkala shekel. If it's big enough for that, that's the shir. Hoya maluach, but it was already salted. So you started the process of adayin lenasis bekema v'lei. So you didn't continue the process, but you started the process of processing the hide. Is shiyuri kedilasis kameya. That's the share of this that you make a kameya. Hoya osi bekemach. You already started the process of putting kemach on it. Of adayin lenisabed ba'apza is shiyuri kedilichtaval v'saget. And nigmari budei is then shiurei chamisha al chamisha. That's the size of shiurei al chamisha. That's already the size of something which is right to properly write on it. Hamitzi klaf me'ubid. It's already a klaf. Is kedei lichtaval of parsha shma ad b'sharecha, because it can be used. That's the smallest parsha of tefillin. Because when the parsha of tefillin is shma. However, duchsustis, which on duchsustis you can't write tefillin, but you can write a mezuzah. So then it's kedei lichtaval of mezuzah. Mezuzah is larger. It's 2 parshas. Niyor, if you have Niyor, kedei lichtaval of shtei ye'esias shel keshem muchsim, which those are sheheng gedolos me'esias shalona. These are like a note to show, like a receipt that you paid your tax or whatever other thing you had to pay for. So this they would give you a little note, and they would have like 2 large letters on it, and the size of something which on the yard which you could write those 2 large letters. That's a shir. Hamoitzi keshem muksin, something that was already written in keshem muksin, is chayiv. Avol pi shekvar herei lemuchas v'nifter beis lechura. It's like a receipt that you used already. Sharirayu li'elim. It's always a proof. It's always a proof that you paid. It's always good to have. Hamoitzi shtar parua, a shtar which was already paid, or nayer mochuk, so maybe you have nothing to do with it as far as writing. Is kedei lichrech al plitz luchas ktana shel plankton. The size that you could just put in as a bottle stopper. As a bottle stopper, you roll it up and you use it as a bottle stopper for a small bottle. Because you're on the margin, the place, you have some empty space on this star, which is big enough to be able to use as a kesher muksa, so that's also fun. Hamoitzi behema chayiv ha'if, avol pishem chayim chayiv. Avol odom chay eni masu. V'im hoya kofus oy choyle. If the person is ill, so then hamoitzi oise chayiv. So for carrying a behema alive, behema chayiv, you're chayiv. Mashenkin, for carrying a live odom, you're potter, unless he's a kofus or he's a choyle. For isha medada is beno, is man shenit l'achas u'minei achachas. She could help push her son. The child picks up one leg and then picks up the other leg. In other words, she's not pulling him. She's just helping him walk. She's encouraging him to walk. That's fine. Hamoitzi tinek chay b'kis toli b'tzavari is chayiv mishum hakis she'ena kis tfeila latinik, and therefore for the tinik you're potter, because chay adam chay potter. But for the kiss, which is not tafel the tinik, you're potter. You're chayiv. Aval hamoitzi is hagadol. There's aval pishem malubish v'kela v'tabesed b'yodeh. He's wearing clothes. Nevertheless, he's potter. Why? Everything that he's wearing is tuffle to him, and since you're potter on him, you're also potter on everything else that he's wearing. However, he wasn't wearing them; they were just folded on his shoulders, and they say sechayim, because they're only bottled him if he's wearing them. If he's not wearing them, they're not bottled him. Hametzi chagav chay is kosher. Umes is kegregris. We're talking about a chagav which is kosher, so it's achila. Tziperis kromim ben chayiv ben meisa kol shewai mipnei shematznin eisen l'refuah v'chen kol ki yitzibazim. Hameis v'anevelu v'asheretz is kashir to masam, kach shir hitza asam. Because by taking them out, it's the significance is that you're taking away tumah. Mesun avela kizayis, v'sher is kadash. The shear of these things are the shear of tumah. Hayisham kizayis mitzumtzum and beheitzi mimenu kechatzi zayis is also chayiv. Why? Shari hoyel b'maisa. By taking out half of a kizayis of a mess out of the house, you are hoyel shenismayat hashir melatami. Aval hoytzi kechatzi zayis mikechazayis umachza mikechazayis umachza v'chen kol kiyetz is potter because you weren't hoyel b'maisa. Since the kazayis is left, so it makes no difference. And l'chura who adin lavdav kechatzi kazayis, who adin a chvesus, l'chura kolshu. As long as you made it less than a kazayis, you're chayiv l'chura. V'chein kol kiyetze b'zeh b'sharatumas. V'amed dvarim amurim she'eni chayiv ela latzoyis kishir v'shehitzi stam. Aval amoitzi l'zera. If a person takes a seed and he has intending of right now going and planting it, it's not like something which is oimed l'zera. He's right now going to plant it. He's using it l'refuah. Or using it as a sample. So he's chayav b'kolshu. Then there's no shir. In other words, there's a specific purpose of him carrying it now. He's not only carrying an item which has a chshivas. There's a chshivas to his present carrying. He's carrying it in order to do something with it. So that the fact that he's going to do something with it, that gives a chshivas to the carrying, and therefore makes no difference the size of the item. Hamatzniya dover lizriya el refuah el dugma. He put it away. He wanted to plant it. He wanted to use it for refuah. He wanted to use it as a sample. And v'shachach lo metzniya. He forgot. And then v'yitziyah stam. So even though right now he's not really taking it out for these purposes, is chayiv olav b'kolshu shal das machshava rishein eitzim. We consider his das now behemshik to his previous das. Aber sh'ar ha'adam ein chayav and olav el b'shiri. Everyone else would only if he has the shir. Zorek zeh shehetzi kvar l'teicha eitzer. You know, as he took it out and then he threw it into the oitzer, the general warehouse. His aval pishem mekaymin nikri, you can still see where it is, but since he threw it away, so kvar botla machshavta rishayna and lefichach im chazer vichnisei is eini chayiv at shiachnas kasher. If we'll take it back in, so then along be chayiv kasher. The fact that he was once matzniya right now was nullified. Halacha chavbeis. Davar she'ein dereb ne'odem latzniya ve'ein roy latzniya. Ki gen damanida imitzniya echad ve'yitziyah chayiv. Aber shara odem turin olav. She'ein chayav ela hitzos davar hakoshe latzniya u'matzniyim kameil. Which l'chura, I mean, over here the chiddush is it's davar she'ein dereb ne'odem latzniya ve'ein roy latzniya. And nevertheless, only he's chayiv. Everyone else is not chayiv. L'chura hu adin. Something which is we learned earlier, Amatzniya double Israel, which is you can't call it double Shein Royal Latzniya. And nevertheless, only he's chayiv and not everyone else. What's the chiddush over here that only he's chayiv and not everyone else is chayiv? The sort of beer. Yeah, I mean, the chiddush is that even though it's double Shein Royal Latzniya, but if he was Matzniya, he's chayiv. But obviously, the other person is not chayiv. Halacha chav gimel. Hamoitzi chatzi shir potter. Now, this shaila is potter b'pashtus and Rambam means potter aval osir, which is only osir midrabanan. The question is, what about the din of chatzi shir osir min atera? So you do that there's an issue whether chatzi shir osir min atera applies to malacha Shabbos. Whereas the Chacham Tzvi holds that b'chlal the holding of chatzi shir osir min atera is only legabe melechas isra achila. There's a Rashi in Shabbos that says, Ayin Gimel, that says that the Chatzi Shir of the Malachas of Itzah is also a din of Chatzi Shir. So the Rashi says clearly that there's a din of Chatzi Shir Osam and Atera, V'nigeya, if you're Moitzi, Pachas Mikashir. In Rambam, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that it's Osam and Atera. The Pashas HaLashon is Potter only Midrabanan. So you could say that since there's a din of Malacha, so if you're missing the Shir, so just like we say there's a Musik, even if you hold Chatzi Shir Osam and Atera, but everyone understands that there's a musik called Chatzi Malacha, and therefore a oiker is oiker and v'lehiniach or hiniach v'leyakar, so that's a Chatzi Malacha, and it's not a Chatzi Shir, and therefore it's not Osam and Atera, even to the man that hold, even to those that hold that by Shabbos there is a musik of Chatzi Shir Osam and Atera. So it could be the Rambam holds that the Shir of the Malacha is not only a Shir, it's like a din of the Malacha. So the Mela, It's always a chatzi malacha. If you don't have the shear, it's chatzi malacha. It could be. There's other sports. I'll call upon him a moitzi chatzi shear pot. V'chein kol ha'isem malachim and malach is chatzi shear pot. Heitzi chatzi shear v'iniche. And then the chazer v'heitzi ha'chatzi ha'acher is chayiv. Aber wenn kodam v'igbiya ha'chatzi ha'rishon kedem ha'nochaz ha'chatzi ha'sheni is there nasa k'misha nisav. It's no longer there in the pot. Heitzi chatzi shear v'iniche. V'chazar v'heitzi chatzi ha'acher. V'havire al ha'rishon b'tech shleisha. So he's walking over that other thing. He's within 3 tvachim of that item. So he's chayiv. Shahamaver kimishi hiniach al gabi mashu. We learned before that if you're miniach al gabi mashu, so then it's considered munach. So over here also, since you are maver toich gimel tvachim of the item which you placed originally, so it's as if you were hiniachit. Avalim zarke eini chayiv achi yanuach sham al gabi mashu. So the person throws the item, and that item is, let's say, passing over the other item, and it's within less than 3 tvachim. It doesn't help because lepela wasn't nochal gabi mashu. But over here, it's lying on your hand, and your hand is within 3 tvachim of the item which he placed. So memela, since it's within 3 tvachim of the item which he placed, so memela is considered munach because it's lying on your hand. That's called nochal gabi mashu. You're walking. Now lechura, you have to understand l'maynaf gemina if it's up. If it's within 3 tvachim of the ground, so avadi yechayev. Why not? You place this item, and now you place this item. How did you place this item? Either you put it down on the mamish, or you put it in your hand, which is some of the 3 tvachim of the ground. It's considered munach. Elamai over here, it's not 3 tvachim, less than 3 tvachim of the ground. It's less than 3 tvachim of the item. And what it'll be if it'll be less than 3 tvachim of another item? Whereas a person takes an item and he puts it in the ground. Then he goes and he takes another item, the rest of the shear, takes a chatzi gregers, puts on the ground. Then he takes another chatzi gregers and he walks and he carries it near the first chatzi gregers within less than 3 tvachim. So he's chayiv. If he carries it within less than 3 tvachim of the ground, he's also chayiv because this item is lying there and this item is lying there. And what happens if he carries it less than 3 tvachim of another item, not of the ground, of another item? He's also chayiv. What's the chiddush of this halacha? You have to understand. Halacha chav dalet. Hoitzi chatzi shir, and then the hoitzi chatzi shir behelam echad l'rshus achas is chayiv because it was the same thing. Because he did two shiurim and he brought them together, and they're both there. However, the shtei rishuyos, if they didn't put it to the same rishus, he put it to the shtei rishuyos. Is im yesh b'neim rishus shechayoven aleh poter. Aber hoyse b'neim karmelis is arein k'rshus achas, and therefore chayiv chayv. So if a person, let's say, carries from Rishus Harabim, let's say Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Harabim, and then if a chatzi shir, and then he brings another chatzi shir to that same Rishus Harabim, so he's chayiv. If he brings it to another Rishus Harabim, and there's a separation between the Rishus Harabim, the first Rishus Harabim he brought it, and the second Rishus Harabim, so it depends what's separating. If a Rishus Hayachid is separating, so then he's potter, and if a karmelis is separating, so that's not really considered a real rishus, and therefore he's chayiv. Halacha chaf hey. Hamoitzi pachis mikashir. V'kodim she'anichi nitpach v'chazer kashir. Or v'chein hamoitzi kashir. V'kodim she'anich tzamach v'chazer pachim mikashir potter. Because either the akira wasn't kashir or the anacha wasn't kashir. Hamoitzi kigregus lachila, which is the shir. And v'tzamka kodim anacha. And it was tzamka. And then it was chashiv aleh l'zriya oil refuah. So even though it was tzamka, first it was tzamka and then he was chashiv. So that's fine. She'eni tzarich shir hariz chayiv ki machshavti shleis anacha. So in other words, when he took it out, it was shir of achila. And then it was tzamka, and then he decided that he wants it l'zriya oil refuah. So that's fine. Because the achila was b'shir and the sefer was b'shir. Even though in the middle, when it was tzamka, it wasn't mamash shir. But he always had the option of deciding that it's l'zriya. Hoitzi pachas mikigregus l'zriya, and v'kodim hanocha chazar v'choshev aleh l'achila. So now he has something which is less than a gregus and it's choshev aleh l'achila. Is potter. The imtavcha kodim hanocha v'nasis kigregus kedim she'imolach aleh l'achila. Over here, if it was tavcha before, he took it out and it was less than a shir. But he took it out l'zriya, that was fine. Then it was tafcha, so it's also still fine. And then he decided that he wanted lachila, so that's also fine. Okay, lachila is chayiv. Shafilu lechish of hayim is chayiv al machshavas hayitzah. But in this case, he has to. In other words, over here, it's not enough. If he would, let's say, he took out something that was less than a gregris lizriya. If he would have this, and then it was tafcha, and then he decided lachila. But if it would have been decided tachila, and then tafcha, it wouldn't have helped. Because since he decided lachila, right now it's not a shir. When he decided lachila after tafcha, that's a kashir. Mashenkin over here, he decided lachila. If he would decide lachila before tafcha, it wouldn't work. Nafka, if it was first tafcha, and then he decided lachila, it works. Mashenkin in the previous case over there, he took out a kigregis lachila. And then it was samka. Even though it was samka kedem anocha, and then he was chashav alel lizriya. That's also fine, because it's always biyadi to be chashav alel lizriya. So since the situation was changed because of his chashav, and that was always biyadi, so that's beseda. Even though in the middle it was a matzav of before chashav. Masha'inkin, if it was say the chiyuv became through the fact that it was tafcha wasn't biyadi. So since tafcha biyadi, so it could only be that it was tafcha before he decided to change it lachila. Halacha chav zayin, heitzik igregus lachila, v'tzamka, v'chazer v'tafcha kedem anocha. And the whole time he's thinking lachila. Is that is a suffix, im nitchei leinotcha. Zorak kezayis oichlin l'bayis tomi, v'hishlim kezayis zel lo'oichlin shoyu sham, v'nasa akil kebeitza. So there is a suffix in the chayiv al kezayis. Normally, you need a kegregus, but over here was hishlim hashir linyan tumah, because now it's kebetza, and a kebetza is metame. Whereas a kebetza is a chidush, that a kebetza is metame. Elaine is chayiv. Does this chidush legabe shir oichlim, the fact that it was nischayiv, it became a kebetza, is that enough to be mechayiv, to be considered a shir? But the Rambam says it's done only by kezayis. He doesn't mention it again. Chotzi zayis. Chotzi zayis could also be mashma ki kebetza. If it's a chotzit zayis, for sure it's not. If it's a gezayis also choshev. But normally you need a gregus. The shaila is over here, it's mashlim kibetz. Hametzi pachas mikashir aval pisha yitzia bekeli is potter. Shakeli tveilolei. Ein kavanosi leitzoa sakeli. El leitzoa masha betechi. V'harei ein bekashir. Lefichach im heitzi adam chayim she'eini kofus. And therefore, you're not chayiv for being moitziim, and you took him out b'mita potter, afalamita, shalamita tveilolei v'chein kol kietz. And the Rebbe would always bring this as a dogma for the musik, that the ikar is the chayis eliki, and the world is only a keli to the chayis eliki. So memela, it comes out that the world is bottled to the chayis eliki, which is in the world. Hamoitzi kupas haroichlin, aval pi sheyesh b'minam harbe, nafilu hitzia b'tech kape, eni chayiv alachas. Because Shem Mitzvah Echadu. So if you take out many things together, so even though each item is a separate item, you only chayiv one. And what's the chiddush? You only chayiv one. L'chura pasha, you only chayiv one. I mean, even if you do it one after the other, but since it was behelam echad, so you chayiv one. So it's all the same malachim. You're doing it obviously behelam echad. So what's the chiddush that you chayiv one? So l'chura, the vart is that normally even when you do two malachas behelam echad, but there's a musik called Yediyas Machalkas, that if you found out about one and then you found out about the other, you can be chayiv shtei chatois. Mashenkin over here it's not pshat, you did two averis, and you did it behelam echad, you chayiv one chatos for both averis. But there's a chatimtza to be chayiv two chatois for both averis. But over here it's not one aver, it's only one isis, shem mitzvah echadu. Memela, it's not shaychus to have two chatois, it's one ma'isa aver.